Welcome to episode 2 of Seen and Heard, the Somerville Journal Scene's weekly podcast. This episode, we will be discussing our goals for the paper, and then we will be having a discussion about the news of the week. I am reporter Eon Bailey.
And I am publisher and managing editor Brandon Roberts.
And I think we can get through this goals list pretty quickly, but I do feel excited to share with people kind of our vision. So the first thing on our list is meet your public servants. For those who have not caught in the paper that we've been doing this, I'll give a brief explanation of what that is. It is a series of profiles on elected officials so that you can get to know who is serving you in an elected position. And we hope to compile these into a special webpage where you can go and, in addition to finding quotes from these people, you can figure out what areas they serve, how to contact them, things of that nature. So I want it to be a comprehensive resource, and it's going to take some time to come together, but I'm very excited about that series.
Eon didn't say it, but this was all Eon's idea. I had an idea about this when I first started, but was unable to implement it simply because I didn't have resources. I didn't have Eon. So, but Eon came with this idea, took it by the horns, and it has been one of, I haven't seen the actual analytics, but just from word of mouth, Eon, you may be able to confirm it's been one of our more popular features that we've started since you started.
It's been fun. It's been informative. I'm building relationships with people who serve in elected positions across the county and town, and I'm very excited to be doing this. So that would be one of our goals, is to continue to pursue Meet Your Public Servants and really bring that resource together. And the next thing on the list is a development section. Would you share your thoughts on why development matters to our readers?
Seems to be the more talked about topic among elected officials, residents, and just general chatter. I think that you hear is, oh, there's too much traffic. Oh, there's, they don't need to build these apartments. Sewer, for instance, is another one that people bring up a lot. Oh, our infrastructure can't handle all the people. We started looking into this development section, and then we realized that we had done a lot actually on development the past little bit, including several articles here recently. It is an oft discussed topic and very important, and I just feel like it's going to stay that way. I think that's an ongoing it's just always going to be an issue. So we need to have a dedicated section where people can get on there and read about what's going on. If they're thinking about moving here, if they're moving here and just now kind of getting into the talk about what's going on, they want to get on there and look at it. Just another attempt at us being, a one-stop shop for what people need from us.
Certainly. I think it being a one-stop shop is very important because the topic of development is vast, it's complex, and it's ongoing. So it might be a little difficult to fully understand the conversation if you haven't already been a part of it. So I want to fill in kind of any gaps in knowledge people may have and really catch folks up on what's happening in our town and how the town is changing as it changes. So we are going to be hosting content that informs about 500 North Main, Complete Streets, the new public safety complex, referendum updates with the schools as they grow to try and accommodate more population. So any questions you have about development, I want to be able to answer those questions in a convenient way. And that is why we are making a development section. And then our next initiative is expanding our social media presence, which sounds simple, but it's a little bit of a challenge. And it's a challenge that I'm happy to take on. I think it's very, very important. It is not a chore and it is not something for fun. It is a responsibility. I believe that anywhere people are receiving information is a place that we need to be.
Walked into a meeting on Thursday. Today is what? March 29th. Saturday, March 29th is when we're recording this. I walked into a meeting Thursday evening, and the first person I saw grabbed me and said, I love what you all are doing on social media. I love the videos. I saw you launched a podcast. I love that. And I said, well, I feel like it's almost like an investment and we're just diversifying. And anyway, they loved it. So, but that was one of when you and I, before you came on, when we were talking in the interview process, one of your passions, I guess, was social media our presence on it, and how not just a more robust presence, but how we're on it. The videos, you do the graphics, and you don't just record somebody talking with a little, a Facebook post about we talked with so and so about so and so. It's a mini story with the videos, and I love that you have that. I mean, I'd love to do it too. I think every editor would at a small paper, but having the time and the just being able to do it is one thing. Doing it is another, and I think you've done a great job doing that. Do you want to talk about why you love, other than the fact that that's your age and your kind of how you approach things because of the generational stuff, but why you love social media so much and the videos?
People spend more time on social media than they spend with the physical paper. I'm not saying that people don't read the physical paper, because we have a very solid readership that
we spend more time on social media than we do on the physical. I mean,
yes,
that's how it is.
Yeah, it's just so important that we are there with relevant, factual, important information. My stance on social media is that I don't want to post engagement bait. I don't want to pull in random stories from across the country that shock and outrage people so that they will like our post and click on it and make angry comments and then click on the link and see our ads. That's not helpful or informative. I want our content to be local. I want it to be helpful. And maybe sometimes that will look a little more boring than other social medias that you might see. But if it's useful, then I think that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. There's a quote, or really just a general idea, that we're supposed to tell people what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. Sometimes you need to hear some kind of dry information.
Yeah.
And so that's my stance on social media, but that doesn't mean that it has to be boring. And that's why I want to do the videos, to kind of bring these stories to life in a more colorful way. I understand that people consume information in different ways, and maybe some people prefer to watch videos, and that's why I like to have that option for people. And I said this on the last episode, I believe, too, but if I had it my way, we would have video content for every single story. Obviously, with a 2-person operation, we can't really accomplish that, but we are still making an effort to regularly post videos. So those are kind of my thoughts on social media and the importance of it, how I want our social media to be, and what we're trying to do. But yes, an expanded social media presence is a huge goal, and making useful content and interesting content is important to me as well.
I think that the next item on our list is reflecting the entire community, and I think that's a great segue into that, because I believe the social media presence, our expanded social media content may not reflect the entire community no more than just the actual content does, but it does definitely engage way more people, many more people than say if we were just online and print. We still got work to do on the reflecting the entire community, but I think we always will. I don't think we'll ever wake up one day and be like, all right, we have achieved the perfect balance and reflecting all communities, people in their community and their concerns. That's just
we can aspire to a perfect paper, but perfection is not always possible. One thing that I'm doing to kind of try and fill in some gaps is I like to sit down and meet with people and hear different types of opinions. So that looks like meeting with other journalists to hear about how they gather their news, meeting with community members to see how they feel about the work that we're doing, what they would like to see from us, and what matters to them in the community. And these are conversations that I would naturally have just on the job anyway, but really making space for it so that I can, sit down with intention, take notes, and I don't know, I just like to do it. I probably don't have to do it, but that's kind of ties into this goal of reflecting the entire community. I just want to improve as a reporter as much as I can, however I can, and that means learning from other people.
And I do well. I want to say I've been doing this. This is my 22nd year. Worked as an editor all of that time. If I've been in newspapers, I've always had an editor position. So, and I worked with tons of reporters. The fact that you want to go interview people, go out and cover the story is, it just makes me so warm and fuzzy because so many people don't anymore. And even people my age, because I'm the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kind of came up through that time in journalism when you still went and saw people. So it just kind of stuck with me. And the natural curiosity of a journalist that journalists has to have, should make you want to go out. But, with text and email and even Zoom these days,
Mm-hmm.
so many journalists, especially young ones, don't really want to go out. I just want to commend you for not just going out, but wanting to. I've never had to say, Eon, you might want to go meet with them.
Yeah.
You're always out. You're always got the keys and out the door. So I think that's wonderful. And I think it's reflected in the quality of our content that you and I both have. That we like to meet with people. It creates you can write a better story if you're sitting in their living room interviewing.
Oh my gosh.
It's just how it goes.
Yeah. And the last thing I would say about this bullet point too is that, so we've kind of highlighted the efforts we make to stay plugged into the community as we work on this goal. But I would directly now break the fourth wall and ask that you tell us if we're missing something, or bring a story to us if you have one that you think really matters and needs to be told. This is a community paper, and so we have a relationship with the community, and I want it to be collaborative, and I want people to give us their ideas. So that also kind of serves this goal of reflecting the entire community. And
I tell Eon all the time, we talk all hours of the day, always about content, about covering this, what that, and I tell Eon all the time, my philosophy is no stories are too small for us to cover. So if you're listening and you have a story and you think, well, the paper won't be interested, don't think that. Always bring it to us. We have a funny way of finding an interesting angle in everything. That's what we do. I mean, that's just how we are. That's how we think. So, yes, bring it to us no matter what. Let us make that determination. Don't have a preconceived notion that we won't be interested. I promise you'll be surprised.
Yeah, it's always worth a try. A last bullet point is expanding the newsroom. Put simply, in my fantasy world that I live in, I like to sell more papers and hire more people. That's it.
You can figure that out. You go on the lecture circuit, because that's what we're all doing. So,
yep.
But yeah, I mean, of course, we'd love to have many departments here.
Yes.
But usually I just stick my head out of the office and ask Eon to come in there and we sit and talk about stuff. So
yeah,
maybe one day we may have a dedicated social media person, an investigative reporter, a features writer, and all that. But for now, those people are us.
Yes.
So.
And I like it. I like doing all that stuff. It keeps your day interesting. It's just simply fun. However, for example, I post on social media in batches sometimes, because we take turns doing the social media. We want to post every day, and I'll just post in batches. If we had somebody dedicated to social media, they could post at intervals throughout the day so that there's an appropriate kind of timing and stream of content coming out. There could be graphics for every post. There could be, instead of one video a week, maybe more videos. We're doing as much as we can to realize these goals to the fullest extent possible. Those goals could be bigger if we had the manpower, and that's why I included that bullet point. But it's not a complaint, it's just kind of a dream.
Being a community journalist has its downfall. Hours are long, pay is low, stress is high, you have all that. However, I feel like community journalists are not only by far the more well-rounded of journalists, but I feel like they become very well-rounded people simply because of all the things you have to cover. You become an expert on the local government, you can become an expert on the art scene, you become an expert on just whatever you're covering. You just get to a point where you're like the go-to source. You watch these documentaries or these true crime shows, the first person they interview when they're talking about this story is the guy from the local or a woman from the local paper. Mm-hmm. They just know more about it. So
yeah,
it's an interesting life to live. It's an interesting job to have, and there aren't that many left. So why not do the best at it we can? I think we are.
Absolutely. So to kind of summarize our conversation, our goals for the paper are to really just offer an array of content to serve people in different ways, kind of almost modernize our approach through social media, and just do things that weren't possible before there was an extra person. And I think that I'm proud of the way that we have handled working toward that. And if you have input for us, please let us know, because we are listening. I have read every single comment on every single post I've ever made for this paper, and we do care.
Not tooting my own horn here, but I feel like I was one of the busier people I knew before you got hired. And now I feel like we're both two of the busier people I know since you got hired. So, and it's just the nature of the beast. So I mean, we don't expect each other to take the load off each other. We just, we're all kind of just pedal to the metal and letting it rip. And one thing we wanted to do in this podcast too was talk about the actual paper. And there used to be a show on C-SPAN. Eon will mention often about being a journalist since a very young age, at least mentally. And there was a show on C-SPAN. It may still be on C-SPAN. When I was a kid, where they would just hold up the newspapers, Washington Post, New York Times, whatever, and talk about what was in the paper. And I loved that show. I just loved it. So when Eon was like, well, we were talking about the podcast, I thought maybe we should do something like that. So we're going to talk about this week's paper, the March 26th Journal Scene.
Yep, and I can't wait to get started on that. A story that really stood out to me this week was potential tax changes in the area. And this is talking specifically about the Berkeley County parts of Somerville. So at a recent budget meeting, the finance director, Rhonda Moore, pointed out that the town is returning more in, I believe, property taxes, yes, confirmed, property taxes, than is legally required. So the general fund currently receives $756,405.53 from Berkeley County and could be receiving $1,890,837.31. So an exact quote from her is, "There is a cost to it." So an existing tax bill on a $300,000 home in Berkeley County could be, or should be at this point, $368.97, but it could be $631.98 if changed. But that's, and this is another quote, if the council completely went by the statute. So it's a bit of a complicated story, but that's my best attempt at putting it in simple terms. What really also was interesting to me about that is that no one in the room could really identify why the town was returning more than legally required. Councilmember Bob Jackson said, "I don't remember us ever discussing that since 2007. And he's been, if you read his Meet Your Public Servants, he's been serving in that position since 2007. They also discussed the potential of a sales tax for capital projects, and said that residents could vote on that. So these are some rumblings from town council, the finance director, from that budget meeting that really stood out, because I know that people really care about taxes, and I wanted to break that down.
Yeah, nothing perks the ears of elected officials and residents alike, the word taxes. So
yep.
That's a big one. There's the story on the rail, before we get to your centerpiece, about the alleged gang members that were arrested for shoplifting from Palmetto State Armory. There's a trend going nationwide with newspapers, more so with the big papers than the community papers, about how and when they report on crime. Like there's some papers, the larger ones at least, have enacted a threshold. Like if someone steals less than $50,000, then it doesn't go in the paper. If someone's arrested and charged, it doesn't go in the paper, only if they're convicted. And I kind of get that with the bigger papers. I think the Houston Chronicle was the one that kind of spearheaded this whole shift in crime coverage. But with the population growth, as we mentioned before, one of the things that has also grown is crime. And Chief Wright told me once that there's not only more crime here, there's different crime than they've been used to because of the growth. So as of now, unless I'm told by the big wigs that we don't report on crime anymore. We're going to still report on crime. It may not be a front page rail story, but I think there's an intense public interest in crime reporting, and we will continue to report it. Some papers may not see the news value of a string of car break-ins, but people, communities like this one do, and we work for them. So
yeah.
We'll talk a little bit about this digital act. You said something after you covered this story. You said you didn't realize that internet connectivity, was still a problem in some places.
Yes, and it very much is. So the Digital Access Summit was kind of a convening of folks from nonprofits, internet service providers, and elected officials as well. Was it elected officials? Government officials. So not necessarily elected positions, but people who work in government. All of those folks came together to talk about how can we bring not only internet access to underserved areas in South Carolina, but also digital literacy, how to use the technology, how to navigate information online. Those go hand in hand with that initiative. And I was really interested in hearing about that concept. There is an organization known as the Low Country Digital Equity Coalition, and Stacy Lindbergh was there speaking with me about the importance of the event. She commented, if you try to function in today's society, you know that you need to have access to internet. And so there are people in our state who are going without that important resource. Another thing that stood out to me about the story was, the reason we reported on it was because it took place in Somerville. And so I didn't write this portion into the story because it wasn't relevant to the central idea that, they're trying to expand broadband and digital literacy. But the fact that this statewide event was hosted here in our town tells me a lot about where we're at as a community and our importance on a broader level. They spoke about how it's easier to get here than to some other places. We had, the conference center was a good place to host. That's just my little aside, but I thought that was interesting that it was hosted here.
Well, anybody who knows me knows, in the least little bit, knows that my life is consumed outside of work with movies, music, and TV. And I can't believe we made it through almost 2 episodes of the podcast before I referenced Parks and Rec, but there's a scene in Parks and Rec when Adam Scott's character, Ben Wyatt, and you know what I'm talking about, when he's going after Grizzle, and he tells the Perd
Hapley.
He tells Perd Hapley, who's playing the judge on the show, the internet's no longer a luxury, it's a necessity. And Ben Wyatt's character is exactly right. And I don't think, you imagine just, you or I, or anyone listening, imagine just waking up tomorrow and not having the internet. Some people wouldn't know what else, they wouldn't have an alternative method to do stuff, to pay bills or whatever they do. So, that's, obviously it's still an issue because they're having summits about it, well-attended summits apparently at a conference center here in Somerville. So it's kind of an out of sight, out of mind thing. We have the Berkeley County paper too, and Eon doesn't. But the Cross community, they just celebrated getting hooked up community-wide to the internet. It's 2025. There are still places that are isolated internet-wise. I think that is an important event to have, an important event for us to be at. Now, the bottom story on the front page is a story I wrote from a conversation and a letter I received from Phyllis Hughes, who was on the Dorchester District 4 school board. She's head of the Dorchester Heritage Center. Very smart, I love Phyllis. I think anybody knows who does. She has written a letter that's on the opinion page this week, vehemently opposing the DD2, DD4 school district merger that's been proposed. She's not, from what we gather, she's not alone. Am I correct, Eon? It's not a popular proposal, at least among those on those 2 school boards.
Right. I've written 2 stories about this topic. So I went to St. George for the first meeting about this, and it was basically an opportunity for the public to speak on the proposal. And it was like being in church. People were testifying. They were very, very passionate. A lot of people raised a lot of different and unique points. Sometimes when you go to these things, people are all saying the same thing, but it was lively. And when I wrote that article, I really wanted to convey the energy of the room. I mean, it was lengthy. And during that time frame, there were moments where people laughed, the whole crowd. There are moments when people cried at the podium. This is an emotional issue for people because it is about their kids' futures. So when I was covering that, that really stood out to me. But at that first event, I heard some non-committal speakers, but the majority of the speakers were deeply opposed to the merger. And then when I did a follow-up story about the DD2 board discussing it, I found that no one really came out and took a stance, but they were unhappy with the process by which this was introduced because they weren't informed of what was in the draft. They couldn't answer questions to the community they serve. There was still some unhappiness there, even though I didn't myself hear anyone actually specifically oppose it. So yes, to answer your question in a very lengthy way, there's a lot of people who are against it. Now, I'm not saying that people who are in favor of it don't exist, but I have not had the opportunity to cover that yet.
Well, the people that I've spoken with about this, specifically about this, not just when it's come up, but the people I've spoken with specifically about this topic say two things. One, they should have had some input on the proposal. And two, it needs to be voted on. It doesn't need to be just a bill that is passed and so now you merge. However, voting on it, so for instance, if the folks in DD2 are for the merger and the folks in DD4 are not, voter-wise, DD2 is going to crush them if they vote on it because of population. I have heard there are some residents who have expressed, it could help with our funding, because DD2 is not well funded.
Yes.
Yeah, there's all kinds of, there's multiple rabbit holes with this stuff, with this one.
This is actually our second attempt at recording this. We had some audio issues on the last one, and now we're here on a Saturday getting it done. But on our last attempt, we talked about the community calendar and its importance. And I really liked what you had to say about that. So if you don't mind repeating yourself, I think it would be good to include.
Sure. Our community calendar, for those who don't know, includes free community event listings. So basically, if you're having an event where you don't make any money, it qualifies for the community calendar. If it's a for-profit event, you probably have to buy an ad. That's just the policy I go by as editor and publisher of the paper with what goes in the calendar or not. Can't put everything in the calendar, otherwise we won't make any money. I can't put, you know how it goes. Anyway, and it's really more for meetings and things as opposed to like money-making events anyway. But years ago, I was at a newspaper in Hillsboro, Ohio. It was my first job out of college. I was made editor of that paper 90 days after I graduated college. So, and at the time I was one of the, if not the youngest editor in the country. I made the decision to pull the community calendar, which is the same as our paper. It's always on page 2 in the Journal Scene. It was always, I think, on page 7 above the fold in that paper. But I made the decision to pull the calendar to make room for some copy that had to go in that week. The community nearly revolted, not realizing what an impact pulling that community calendar out of the paper would have on some people. I got calls from people who said that they were low income and they looked at the calendar for events that may have free food. One lady said she was a former shut-in, and she always looks at our calendar to determine any events or meetings or whatever she may want to attend that week because she's trying to get out more and stuff like this. So long story short, after about a dozen phone calls from people upset over me pulling this calendar. Not only did I never pull that calendar again, but I've also always believed in a robust, very detailed, as detailed as I can be, calendar. So hopefully you look at page 2 of the, you got golf tournaments in here, career expos, the banner program for the town with the veterans, Guys and Dolls at Somerville High School is putting on, Azalea After Dark by the Exchange Club, the Somerville Shag Club meetings, the concert series at St. John the Beloved Church, things like that. So,
And there's a lot of real resources in here too, like Al-Anon, which is for family members or loved ones of someone who struggles with alcohol. There's weight loss groups, or there's a weight loss group. So I think that, it's not only is it, fun events, it's also real resources that could help people. So I love that story that you told about the importance of having this calendar, because I am still new at this, and that's not something that I would have thought about. And I love knowing that this is something that we do that has a real impact on people.
I'll tell you what, if you don't think that anybody reads the calendar, look, I'll take it out next week. And you can come sit in my office with me. No, not you, just saying, if one thinks, because you may think, oh, nobody skim over it, but there are people who the calendar is important, very important to them.
We've got some significant ones on this page.
Yeah, on page 4, I covered the last town council meeting on March 13th because it's I think we both had 2 meetings on Thursday, so we had 4 total. So I think I took the town council that. So I broke it up into 3 stories. One ran last week about in the 19th edition about the public comment about growth and development, and like Hayward Hudson and those folks requesting a moratorium. The 2 other stories I got out of it were at the beginning of the council meetings where they recognized the employees and stuff. They recognized, or they proclaimed Women in Construction Week. They recognized the pageant winners that, oddly enough, Eon had a story about, the 19th, the issue in the paper before. And then traffic and property concerns from the ponds. And, so anyway, those are we usually, Ryan, you may not know this, maybe we mentioned it in our first podcast, that we can get 3 or 4 stories out of one meeting instead of writing a novella about one meeting.
Yes.
So these are basically, I wrote 3, the one most important one and ones that I made room for ran last week. These 2 are the other 2 stories from that meeting.
Somerville is losing a long-time business and gaining a brand new one. So Eva's on Main has now closed, and it was in the community for about 80 years. That is a long time. And what really stood out to me about this story is how the owner was, when I spoke to the owner, I could tell that it was important to her that the community support the incoming business, even though we are losing Eva's on Main. And I thought that was something special from that story. The new restaurant will be a deli-style Italian place. Eva's on Main, if you've never been. First of all, are you from Somerville? Second of all, it's Southern comfort food. And so that's going to be a big change. But I thought that was a special story, and it was an emotional story. I don't think people realize how often people cry in front of us. But that happens a lot, or it's happened multiple times.
Yeah, and you've been here 3 months.
Yeah.
Before. I've seen it already. So. Yeah.
And by the way, if you do cry in an interview with me, you're crying in front of the right person. I cry all the time. It's all good. I don't want anyone to feel bad about that. I think it actually makes the story a lot more special, and I'm grateful that people would feel that comfortable in an interview. So on that note,
I don't cry that often, but if you do cry in front of me, it's not, nobody that reading that story is going to know. Nobody outside of that room is going to know.
Yeah, so, exactly.
And I may cry with you some. Yeah. So I mean, I'm not that big of a crier. I just never have been, but feel free to cry.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Also, I want to mention something. This week's paper, the 29th edition, if anyone has it, we'll grab it and look at it. The printing in this week's paper is phenomenal. The ads are beautiful. The pictures look beautiful with the stories. It is, that's an important. I feel like that's an important aspect of a paper is its appearance.
Certainly.
The YMCA ad on page A6 is particularly beautiful. I mean, they all turned out really nice, but there's no blur. They're just really sharp. We didn't do it. We didn't do that part of it, but still, I mean, that's goes into the being a quality product.
Really pops.
Yeah.
There's a story on A6 about Robin's retirement, the former superintendent from Dorchester School District 2. That story, I saw a lot of comments online, not necessarily on our post, but even other outlets posting about it. There's a robust discussion about that. And that was your story. Did you want to discuss it a little bit?
Yeah, a lot of people in the community here are aware that Dr. Shane Robbins suddenly retired. It's kind of an unexpected announcement, and the board accepted his retirement, and Dr. Robbins is gone. So they named the interim superintendent, and then there was a lot of questions surrounding this whole thing. He was still under his first contract. Why? Just a lot of questions. Why is he leaving? Framed as retirement. People were saying, oh no, it's technically a resignation, whatever. So anyway, the school board finally released the terms of his separation, and it was a year's salary, which was in almost $250,000, unpaid PTO, and etc. So while there were already questions about, what was the real reason or whatever, and I'm not saying that the reason they're giving is not real. I'm just saying there are people asking, man, this seems odd. He was still under contract. He'd only been here a few years. It's before the school year ended. That was a big one I kept hearing. Why would he wait until the school ends before he does this? Whatever. But they released the terms of his separation, and so the questions that were lingering are still there, and now there are more. So there's a story in the paper about his the mutual agreement, and I imagine there'll be questions in perpetuity.
Yes. And as it develops, if there are updates, we will report. Could you explain the resurfacing project?
The county and town got together to resurface a section of, it's a 0.2 mile extension, Old Trolley Road from Dorchester Road to Ladson Road. So that was one of the, it was a very small section of road. Obviously, it did need repaved, but this is one of the examples of the town and county working together. Mm-hmm. So it became like it was a project that required the town and county to work together. They did, and now it's finished. So for the people in that area, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It's near the, I think it's the Oak View Villa Apartments out there. So yeah, if you're driving through there and you see that it's newly resurfaced, you know why, if you read the paper.
One little story that I loved in this edition was the science fair story on page 810. Trinity Classical Academy sweeps in Low Country Science Fair. Now, my mom does work at that school, which is how I found that story, but I didn't know the teacher who kind of spearheaded this, the science teacher, so there was no connection there. But it was really exciting and fun to be able to write about kids learning, competing, being passionate, being inquisitive. I used to be a teacher, so all those things really warm my heart. Every time there's, I think, a positive story that we post, a common comment is, I want to see more stuff like this. I hate that all the headlines are so negative. But to be fair, I think that we do consistently post and create positive stories like this. So yes, there's bad stuff in the news because that's just the world that we live in, and we want to accurately reflect our community, good, bad, ugly, everything. But I just really wanted to highlight this very wonderful story about kids achieving and kids caring about science, because those stories exist too. It's not all good, it's not all bad. We've got a mix, and I love this little positive story.
Yes, and you and I have discussed many times, news is inherently bad. If a space shuttle launches and goes into space and goes into orbit, they're going to do something on the news about it. If that space shuttle explodes, it becomes a national story and is remembered for years, as you remember. You see what I'm saying? So
Yes.
that the bad element to that is what made it much more newsworthy. Now, I'm not talking about space shuttles exploding here in Somerville, but we go above and beyond, I feel like, to make sure it's not all negative or not even all neutral. We make sure there's positive stuff, and even on the front. And that goes back into that no story's too small. These from a little private school, these students participate in the science fair. So, I mean, on the surface, you think, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
Well, read the story and you'll see this is the first time they ever did it, correct? And then
they won a bunch of
and
stuff.
they kick butt. I mean,
yeah, they were great.
Yeah. And anything, I feel like students, for a community paper, if we're not reporting on in the schools and the students, we might as well just pack it up.
Yeah, I agree. We have our letter to the editor section, and then we have my passion sports.
Also, I want to give a shout out to Eric Epstein. Epstein Architecture writes their Architect's Corner article column. If you don't catch that, it's always fascinating. He's so smart, and he's not paying me to say this. He's just a friend and he has great insight on a lot of things that a lot of people are concerned about around, especially growth. So, Architect's Corner, Eric, I'm from Epstein Architecture. If you've not read it, you should. If you have read it, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. My mentor, Farrell Wellman, and I hope one day this podcast makes it him. You can hear me mention his name. But he was a professor of mine in college. We've people called me Little Wellman in college because he and I we both have a love of trivia. We both, we just were very similar. But he kind of became my mentor and my career coach, kind of like my advisor. And he told me once, he said, the backbone of a community newspaper and the way to know if people are actually reading it and engaged with it is the number of letters to the editor you receive. And this week's paper has 5 letters to the editor. Just 5 people taking the time to sit down, write a letter, send it to me. It's the best feeling in the world. And you know what? I used to run letters to the editor criticizing me and my paper. It hasn't happened yet here, but it has happened. And somebody was like, "Why would you even run that?" And I said, "Well, they followed the guidelines. Just because it's about me. I mean, what kind of integrity would I have if I pulled out a letter that criticized me in my paper?" So anyway, just saying, letters to the editor. We tend to run at least a couple every week. I think. I say I think. Of course, I know I'm the one that puts the paper together, but I'm saying I think if you break it down, it averages out to a couple per week. Some of them are the same people. Some of them are new. Like we get new names, like this Cherie Labat. That's a new one. She's about development. Sue George was about development. Peter Gorman was about development. The other 2 were political. So the opinion page. I know a lot of people love the opinion page. I do too. We wrote an editorial this week about the school consolidation. And of course, Julie Smith's column, wildly popular, always has been. And then the aforementioned letter from Phyllis Hughes is a submission from I ran it as a commentary because it's a little bit longer than the letter is allowed to be. All those are on the opinion page this week. Really, really diverse opinion page this week. Sports, which we all love, correct, Eon?
Yes, I'm actually wearing a sports shirt right now.
Of the New York Liberty?
Yeah.
All right, then tell us what's going on with the baseball season then.
Right.
And I'm just playing. Sports is not Eon's thing. And Eon's very vocal about that. No shame. But anyway, the sports section, Roger Lee, if you know our sports guy, I think he does a great job. He's got Pinewood, Ashley Ridge, Fort Dorchester, Somerville, and then all of those schools have boys and girls teams. So Roger's got a lot to do. And I think he does his best prioritizing what he covers. Sometimes he goes to 3 sporting events in one day, just to get pictures and stuff of all of them, and comes back, writes the story. I think Roger does a great job. But soccer's in full swing, baseball's in full swing. We got a story about Somerville's quarterback, Jaden Cummings, being nominated for a Bridge Builder Award. One thing about all the growth around here is the schools have grown, and therefore they're very good at sports. So Summerville's always good at several sports. Fort Dorchester's always good at several sports. Ashley Ridge is always good. I mean, Ashley Ridge girls basketball was unfortunate what happened to them with the ineligibility thing, but they were probably on their way to a heck of a season. But anyway, the sports section, always one of the more well-read sections of a community paper. By far, I'd imagine the pictures that get cut out the most and put on the refrigerator. So, there's 14 different players pictured on 2 pages. So, if your kid plays sports in Dorchester and DD2, and they've not been in the paper yet, give it time, because I got a feeling they will be.
And they're great photos too. Roger does a great job.
Yes, Roger does do a good job. And, typical sports guy, he's just obsessed with it. And I guess if you have a sports reporter, that's what you want. That's going to do it for episode 2 of Seen and Heard, the podcast from the Summerville Journal-Scene. On behalf of reporter Eon Bailey, I'm publisher and managing editor Brandon Roberts. Thank you for listening.